Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer on polymorphism. We're going to decode exactly how a single line of code can dynamically adapt to do, well, 100 different things. If you've ever looked at a massive software system and just wondered how it stays organized without developers copy-pasting thousands of duplicated commands, you're absolutely in the right place. We are unpacking the architecture that basically prevents total developer madness.
So how can one line of code actually pull this off? Imagine calling a really simple command in your program, and the system just instantly knows exactly how to behave based entirely on who or what is asking. That's the real magic of object-oriented programming we're diving into today. It's kind of like shouting an instruction to a room full of specialized professionals and just trusting each one of them to do their specific job without you having to micromanage every single step.
Here's our roadmap for today. 1. The shape-shifting code. 2. Dynamic versus static polymorphism. 3. Method overriding an action. 4. Tracing object behavior. And finally, number 5. The pros, cons, and myths.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the shape-shifting code.
At its core, the word polymorphism literally just means many forms. Poly meaning many, and morph meaning form. Simple enough, right? In object-oriented programming, this is the concept that lets one piece of code, like a specific method name or a common interface, work seamlessly with a bunch of related object types. And it does this without forcing you to rewrite your logic over and over again. The exact behavior that actually runs, well, that depends entirely on the specific class of the object being used at that very moment. It's what gives your software its true flexibility. You write a generalized command, and you trust the underlying objects to figure out the specifics.
To make this a bit more concrete, think of a school app. You've got a teacher, a student, and an administrator object. Your central system can fire off a single display role command to all of them. They all hear the exact same instruction, but each one responds with a completely unique message tailored to their specific class. The administrator object might spit back a highly secure access granted to mainframe, while the student object just replies, "Hey, where's my homework extension?" You write the command once, but it works dynamically with many related classes. No endless condition checks required.
Moving on to Section 2, dynamic versus static polymorphism.
So we have this great divide in polymorphism. On one side, we have dynamic polymorphism. This happens exactly when the program is actually running, at runtime, using a mechanism called method overriding. The program decides what to do based on the actual object created. Now contrast that directly with static polymorphism. This is resolved by the compiler before runtime, using method overloading, and it relies entirely on the parameter rules you've set up. Think of it like this. Static polymorphism is like a pre-written script. Everything is totally locked in before the curtain even goes up. Dynamic polymorphism, though, that's like improv comedy. The actors are adapting on the fly right there on stage based on whatever is thrown at them.
Let's visualize static polymorphism for a second. Picture a single method named show that actually changes its internal logic depending on your input. If you hand it a number, like the integer 5, the compiler statically chooses the integer version of that method. But if you pass it a string of text, like the name Lena, it automatically maps to the string version. Same exact name, totally different parameters. And the kicker here, the system hasn't even hit the run button yet when this decision is made. The compiler already knows the blueprint it's going to follow based purely on the data types you gave it.
All right, Section 3, Method Overriding an Action.
For those of you currently tackling the IB Computer Science syllabus, listen up, because this is the main event. Let's look at this exact Java snippet. We've got a parent class called animal used as the reference type, but it's actually pointing to a newly created child object, which is a dog. Then we call a.speak. This one single line perfectly captures the absolute essence of dynamic polymorphism. The reference is totally general, but the instantiation, highly specific.
Let's just trace this step by step so we see exactly why it works. Step 1, the reference type is animal. Step 2, the actual object taking up space in memory is a dog. Step 3, because of dynamic polymorphism, Java explicitly ignores the parent's generic default sound and dynamically chooses the dog's specific overwritten speak method right at runtime. And boom, it outputs woof. The absolutely crucial point to remember here is that the method called depends entirely on the actual object created in memory, not the generic reference type that's pointing to it.
Which brings us to Section 4, tracing object behavior.
Let's look at a parent-child relationship scenario just to make sure we're all tracking with this. We have a parent class called vehicle that normally prints out the word moving when its move method is called. But we also have a child class called bike that inherits from vehicle. And this child class overrides that move method to print pedaling instead. It inherits the structure, sure,
but it brings its own specific behavior to the table.
So here's a question for you. If we set a vehicle reference v equal to a new bike object, and we store this bike object inside that vehicle reference variable, what actually happens when we execute the command v.move? What is the exact output going to be? Take a second and really think about it.
Well, if you guessed pedaling, you hit the nail right on the head. Because the actual object stored in memory is a bike, dynamic polymorphism kicks in right at runtime. Java sees the bike object, hunts down its overridden move method, and outputs pedaling. It's just a brilliant piece of logic that ensures the truest nature of the object always shines through, no matter what generic label gets slapped on it.
This is incredibly powerful in massive systems, like, say, a sprawling school database. You basically get this amazing write once, run many advantage. You can call generate report on a single generic list of staff members. The system honestly doesn't care if it's talking to a teacher, a librarian, or a counselor. It just trusts each subclass to dynamically generate its own specific paperwork. This literally saves developers from writing hours of messy, tangled if-else statements to check every single job title. You just say generate report, and polymorphism handles the whole shebang. Plus, it makes the program so easy to extend if you need to add a brand new staff role later on.
Okay, Section 5, the pros, cons, and myths.
Let's start with the pros. Polymorphism offers absolutely amazing flexibility, improved reusability through shared interfaces, and a much cleaner design when you're adding new features. It is the hallmark of a mature, well-architected application. But on the cons side, it can make debugging a total nightmare, especially for beginners. Because the behavior changes at runtime, you might find yourself sitting there at 2 a.m., desperately trying to trace exactly which child class just executed in a sea of dozens of files. And look, if your overall class hierarchy is poorly designed from the start, this feature is just going to add completely unnecessary complexity.
Now, let's bust a really common misconception that trips up a lot of students in exams. You'll hear people confidently state this myth: polymorphism only means inheritance. But is that actually true? We really need to clear this up before you write your next line of code.
That is undeniably a myth. The actual fact is, while inheritance often sets the stage and supports these structures, the true heart of polymorphism is having a single interface or method name that reliably operates across many different forms. Inheritance is just one of the vehicles that gets us there, guys. It's not the destination itself. You can absolutely have polymorphism through interfaces without strict class inheritance, so don't let those two concepts get tangled up. And here is another trap you might fall into when reading documentation. And frankly, it's something that developers constantly mix up even in high-stakes job interviews. A lot of people will tell you that overloading and overriding are the exact same thing.
No way. Definitely not true. Overloading, our static friend, merely changes the input parameter list needed for a method within the exact same class, and it happens before the code even runs. Overriding, on the other hand, our dynamic friend, completely replaces the inherited behavior inside a child class at runtime. They are fundamentally different mechanisms for achieving code flexibility, and they're handled at completely different stages of your program's lifecycle. The crucial takeaway from this whole explainer is that polymorphism allows one single method name to elegantly handle multiple behaviors. By leveraging this, you're making your code base fundamentally more extensible, far more reusable, and honestly just much better equipped to model the complex, shape-shifting systems of the real world. Over the last few minutes, we've gone from defining many forms to separating the static compiler scripts from the dynamic improv, all the way to tracing exact Java execution and busting some major interview myths. Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder as we wrap things up today. If poor design makes tracing execution harder, how might a badly planned hierarchy turn this absolute superpower into a complete software disaster? Just a little something to think about the next time you sit down to sketch out your object structures. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep coding smart.